Hello everyone, and welcome back to the third installment in my Minecraft Dungeons Weapon Enchanting Advice Guide series. My name's Shin, and today we're going to be talking about the third of the OG weapons in the original Minecraft, the Pickaxe. Now, unlike the sword and axe that I covered previously, the Pickaxe is quite a bit different than either of them. The main one being that, unlike them, the weapon has a one-hit combo. This affects a few things. One being that the damage for each hit is uniform because it doesn't have any other hits in the combo, but also, since it's only a one-hit combo, it doesn't have any hits that reach further, and if you look at the reach of the pickaxe already, I would say that's at about maybe the first two hits of an axe in terms of reach, which, not too far. Now you can sort of, like the others, increase the range a little bit, like this. But since the weapon has a uniform reach for all of its hits, you can't just abuse the farthest hit in the combo. You have to attack and very briefly back away a little bit, trying to get to the edge of that tricky reach that the game thinks is still within its range. But it's a really small window, because if I stop attacking... See? It already ran out. But even from this reach here, enemies can still pretty easily hit you, and if you're trying to do this, you're just wasting time that you could be using hitting and killing them, and you're also presenting your back to them. And if enemies are rushing you down, they're going to be closing that distance while you're trying to turn around and get distance from them, so it's not worth it. Also because, compared to swords and axes, a pickaxe has absolutely no pushback whatsoever, but that's fine, because most of the ways that I actually use my pickaxe is the opposite of keeping enemies away. But also the way a pickaxe works, it's not really a problem, because even though the weapon is considerably slower than an axe or sword, even with a mushroom, the damage of each individual hit is so high that it has noticeably more damage per second than either of the two, so its killing power really, really high. So there are a few things that will change some of the enchants that you might want to run on it, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. And let me show you. First off, though, yeah, let me address the giant 3,000 deficit elephant in the room. I do have negative 3,228 enchantment points, and that is because, for a while now I've had the PC version of the game. I just didn't have, any way to really play it because my graphics card isn't super strong. It's barely good enough to run the game to like play through the tutorial, but that's fine because using my cross save, I just took my save, uploaded my hero, downloaded it on the PC version, and I used a special blacksmith that I downloaded and installed. And you see I have also everything enchanted, like literally everything enchanted. And I also have Gilded Sinister Sword. Part of this is so that I can use these things to test them out and show what enchantments that I would run on weapons, but also it's lots of fun. I mean, being able to have everything enchanted and not having to mess around with the blacksmith, putting things in just to get points back so I can put it on other stuff, that was such a pain. But anyway, let me show you these pickaxes that I have here. You will notice I do run a little bit of a different setup on these because these are my main pickaxes right here. I don't have any others, I just have these two diamond ones and this regular pickaxe. And I'll get to that in a minute, but just like I said with swords and axes, any weapon that you want to have for a solid build, the number one thing you want to look for is healing. Either Leeching or Radiance, because like I said, I don't see the "you died" screen very often, and the only time I actually game overed was during a trial where you had one life and it was game over, and there was a bunch of enemies with fire trail, and I had a Tempest knife. And I told a friend, like, hey, I'm gonna trigger rush down after I kill this enemy, watch what happens when I run over the fire trail. And it instantly killed me because fire trail with acceleration on your character is broken. It was fun. But no, if you have a good balance of damage reduction, damage enchants, healing, other things to help mitigate damage or increase your damage on them, you're golden. So, the question is Radiance versus Leeching. Now, in my other two videos I said Leeching for a sword and an axe was better because the weapons weren't super fast and they hit decently hard. Well, a pickaxe both hits harder and is slower. I mean, look at that, it's almost 1,000,000 damage per hit. So with Radiance, you're not going to get that much healing at all. Leeching, so much better. Because you're going to be killing enemies pretty fast, even with only 2 damage enchants, get your health all the way back up. Even enemies that are a bit beefier, they're going to take a few hits, but those enemies, when you kill them, it refreshes at least 80% to all of your health. So yeah, in terms of healing on a pickaxe, if it doesn't have Leeching, personally I would say not to consider it, but you can get away with having lifesteal on your armor and not doing Leeching, but I'd actually prefer both because less chance of dying with double healing. After that comes damage, and I mentioned it in other videos, but I'll go over it again kind of briefly, because there's a little bit more that I have to say for pickaxes versus swords and axes. So first and foremost, there's Sharpness. It's a really good all-around damage enchantment, 30% more or 33% more damage. Now, that does multiply each other too. Like if you have 2 Sharpness, it's not 66% more damage. It will be about 77% because it's multiplying the other Sharpness as well. And if you have 3 of them, then it'll come out to 135% more damage. So they do multiply each other. Downside is that they don't multiply everything. Like they will not multiply 20% weapon damage boost or 30% melee damage on your armor. They don't multiply with Cowardice, Strength Potion, Reckless, Shadow Brew, Pain Cycle, Artifact Synergy, stuff like that. They just add flatly. So if you have it on, say, Renegade armor here with the 20% weapon damage boost and Cowardice, they would combine for 93% more damage with Sharpness instead of multiplying each other. Still though, it's pretty solid. Another option, which I don't really have on any of my weapons anymore because I went for more optimal setups, is Pain Cycle. If I had the enchantment on me, you could see it for yourself if you have it on any weapons in your inventory. It says that you build up pain stacks. After you get 5 of them, the next hit will do 5 times damage. Sounds pretty good, right? But it doesn't fully multiply the total damage that you're dealing on that final hit. It's only multiplying the base damage of your weapon. So here, what it's actually doing is adding 400% of the base damage onto that base. So it would only increase your damage for a pickaxe by just under 400,000 or 4 million more damage, because it's almost 1 million for 1 hit. So it's going to be increasing it by almost 4 million more damage, which isn't bad. It's just not a total multiplier, because if you combine it with Sharpness, it would go from, if you calculate it, Pain Cycle, since it triggers on the 6th hit, and you're doing 4 extra hits of damage, that's 10 hits of damage and 6 attacks, 66.6% more damage. With Sharpness though, the overall damage that Pain Cycle adds is only 55.5% more damage, which is still not bad. It's just, it diminishes the more buffs that you stack unless they're actual multipliers. It's still pretty solid. I prefer Sharpness though because of Cowardice. It's 40% more damage if you're at full health, and since Pain Cycle hurts you to use it, you can't be at full health while using it unless you're maybe running lifesteal armor, but then you're sacrificing some damage if you wanted to do that, and it's just better just to go Sharpness if you wanted to do that. There is, like I said in other videos, Rampaging, which is a 10% chance to trigger every time you kill an enemy, and it increases your attack speed by 50%. What it doesn't tell you though is that this is, again, not a multiplier, it's additive. With a Mushroom, it increases your attack speed by 100%, so you're operating at 200% attack speed, or double. And if you have cooldown on your armor at a high enough power, you can keep Mushroom active all the time, so you constantly have double attack speed. When Rampaging triggers, it's taking you from 200% attack speed to 250% attack speed, which that's only a 25% increase, and it's only a 10% chance to trigger. And it's just better to run Sharpness, especially if you're running Pain Cycle, because since you're hurting yourself with every attack, with Pain Cycle you want as much damage per hit so you don't have to land as many attacks, so you don't hurt yourself as much, and it's just not as worth it. There is also Artifact Synergy, which says after you use an artifact, your next attack does 80% more damage. Again, that's additive, it's not going to multiply your entire total, and in order to get any value out of that, you'd have to use an artifact every other time you attack. And that would mean sacrificing 3 really great artifacts here for melee, so you'd be kind of hurting your defense or your damage in exchange for maybe a 40% increase in damage that doesn't multiply, and it's not really that worth it. Even on a soul build which can use artifacts really fast, it doesn't come out to better than, say, critical hit or something. There's also Echo, which I almost never recommend on any weapon. Surprisingly though, I did find that there are some weapons that Echo can get some use out of, but not for damage. Because if you take a Claymore in comparison to a Pickaxe, it's about the same speed. I think a Claymore's a little slower. So Echo would help a Claymore a bit more, but if you're using a mushroom that has 21.3 second duration, you can get 46 hits with a Claymore without Echo. If you use one with Echo and do the same thing, you're only getting 48 hits, so it's adding 2 extra hits in over 21 seconds, and that's just not good. There is also Thundering, Fire Aspect, and Poison Cloud for elemental damage, but they're not really good for a pickaxe, and I would never recommend Poison Cloud or Fire Aspect on any weapon. And it's really easy to see why. It tells you right on the enchant how much damage that it adds. At 251 power, max value, they add a little over 345,000 damage per second, which for a pickaxe is abysmal. Even, well, first off, not only is that damage really bad, but it's not buffed by your attack speed or your damage. Like, it's set. No matter how much you increase your attack speed, no matter how much your weapon's damage goes up, that's all that Fire Aspect and Poison Cloud add. You can boost them with Fire Focus and Poison Focus, but even then it's only like 602,000, 603,000 damage per second. And if you're using an optimal pickaxe, you can be hitting for 5,900,000-ish damage per second. So 600,000, that's not even, it's like maybe 11-12% more damage. Whereas if you use Cowardice on that same setup, it's like maybe 2.6, 2.8 million more damage per second in comparison. The Focus enchantment's only adding a little over 200,000 damage a second, so it's comparing it to almost 3 million damage per second from Cowardice, not even a contest. Out of all three of them, Thundering is the one that has the best chance to actually be useful, because the faster a weapon is, since Thundering triggers on hit, the better that Thundering actually becomes, especially if the weapon hits weaker too. On a pickaxe, since Thundering does 287,000 damage on trigger and it's a 30% chance to trigger, on average you're doing like 86,000-ish, 270 damage per hit, but for the pickaxe's damage, that's like 8.7% more damage, so even with Thunder or Lightning Focus, it's not going to add that much. So what you really want to aim for is what I have on these picks here. I can show this. Critical hit, and I've talked about this before, but the way that critical hit works is, like it says here, you have a 20% chance to land a triple damage hit, and this is actually a full multiplier on the total physical damage you're doing. So since it's triple damage, that means you're getting 2 extra hits of damage, and it's a 1 in 5 chance to trigger. That means every 5 hits-ish, you're doing 7 hits worth of damage, so on average, that's a 40% damage increase. Very, very solid, very great. And like I said, that's a full damage multiplier. It'll multiply Sharpness, it'll multiply Cowardice, it'll multiply Strength Potions, it'll multiply your armor damage boosts. You notice that I'm not talking about Reckless here because Reckless sucks. Like, really briefly, Reckless at best helps you kill mobs 1.8 times faster because it's an 80% boost. But the health cut is the same as mobs killing you 2.5 times faster, which already is a net negative, but also Reckless is an additive stack. It doesn't multiply your total damage, so say you have Strength Potion active, Reckless is then only upping your total damage by 40%, and it's cutting your HP down to less than half. If you have Cowardice on your armor, and you have Reckless on another piece of the same armor, the Reckless piece is only doing 16% more damage than the Cowardice one for losing 60% of your HP. It's not worth it. The amount of buffs you'd need to mitigate that HP cut would just counteract the damage that it adds, so you'd actually be doing worse. Or you might be doing like 10% more damage for a much bigger HP cut. So yeah, stay away from Reckless. Just stick with Cowardice if you want damage, but you don't need Cowardice either if you want to go full defense. Anyway though, the next enchantment that you want to run for damage would be Committed. And again, I talked about this in my last video actually, talking about crit and Committed. The way that Committed works is, see here it says it does more damage to wounded enemies, 0 to 100% more at level 3. However much percentage of health an enemy is missing, it will increase your next hit's damage by that percentage. So if your first hit does, say, 20%, Your next hit is going to do 20% more on top of that, so it's going to do 24%. So then they're missing 44% of their health, so your next hit is going to do 20% plus 44% of that too. So it's just going to keep on growing and growing. And running the numbers, it comes out to about 43-46% more damage compared to critical hit. So it's slightly better, but I would recommend running them both, especially because Committed, just like critical hit, is a full multiplier. It will multiply all of your damage buffs. Unless it's a non-physical damage buff, those are flat, like Thundering is flat, Fire Aspect is flat, Poison Cloud's flat, etc. However, because a Pickaxe hits kind of narrow, and it is a one-hit combo, unlike swords and axes, you can run Shockwave and Swirling. So Swirling does, at the end of your combo, 613,000 damage and change, and Shockwave does a little over 460,000 damage. Since a Pickaxe has, you see, little under 1,000,000 damage, Swirling actually adds 61.5% more damage to each attack, and Shockwave adds 46.2% more damage to each attack, which is pretty big. Again, the downside is they don't multiply each other, so they come out to a little over 100% more, while Crit and Committed can be like 106% to 110% more damage. Downsides are that Shockwave and Swirling, just like Fire Aspect, Poison Cloud, and Thundering, which I forgot to mention, if any of those get the kill instead of your weapon and it has Leeching on it, then Leeching won't trigger, so that's a really big negative if you like healing. So if you're going to run Shockwave and Swirling on a Pickaxe for that damage and the area reach, I would recommend Wither Armor or Spider Armor for the lifesteal. Because even though you will not get healing for non-physical damage with lifesteal, so Shockwave and Swirling damage won't trigger, like any lifesteal healing, you will still get healing for the weapon's damage, so you'll at least get something instead of blocking the Leeching entirely, which with that combination is a really high chance. So I wouldn't personally recommend Shockwave and Swirling, but again, Diamond Pickaxes are very narrow weapons, they won't hit a ton of mobs, so you can run those two if you're afraid of that, or you can just use it for range on Shockwave. However, as you see here, because the weapon is so narrow, I like to run Gravity, which is an amazing enchant. I love it on so many weapons. The more narrow the weapon, the better. Because the way it works is it pulls enemies into the point of impact of your weapon, so that, especially because you can't stop mobs from grouping up on you, they're really fast, they can be really tanky, so while you're attacking enemies in front of you, there could be mobs on your sides, on your back, hitting you for free, and you can't do anything about it until you kill the guys that you're hitting. So with Gravity, those enemies are all getting pulled towards your weapon, so it can actually multiply the damage that you're doing against groups instead of just hitting 1-2 enemies at a time. Very solid for the weapon, and that's why I said not having pushback on this weapon doesn't matter, because you might want to be pulling enemies towards you, especially if there's some cheeky little creepers that are trying to sneak up on you while you're fighting some stuff right in front of you, because they'll start exploding a decent distance away, far enough that they can explode at a range that'll hit you, but your weapon won't always reach them. But Gravity will pull them in early and kill them before they can explode. It's super great. Especially, like I had said before, if you want to use Gong of Weakening, that makes enemies not only deal 25% less damage, like for all the ones that are affected by it, but they take triple damage too, so Gravity can help group those all up, so you can Gong them all and just destroy them right away so they're not a problem. However, if you don't want to run Gravity on your weapon, which, because Gravity is a little bit bugged on melee right now, some enemies can ignore it if it's on a short enough weapon, which is really annoying, but for groups it really helps pull them in and kill them really fast. You can instead run Guarding Strike, which is one of my favorite enchantments, and I hope they don't nerf it, or at least they don't nerf it too hard. What it does is, when you get a kill with your weapon, you get a shield that reduces the damage you take by an extra 50% that lasts 4 seconds. And I don't have Gravity on this because with Guarding Strike, it doesn't matter how many enemies you kill at a time, you just need to get a kill every 4 seconds, so even if you're only killing one at a time, the amount of damage reduction that it adds on top of even just Ironhide Amulet by itself, you can take that time killing enemies, and still this kills enemies really fast, and you don't have to worry about having to use potions ever. And especially if you have damage reduction like on Renegade Armor here, and that totals to about 80%, maybe 80.75% damage reduction, which is almost the same as Potion Barrier by itself. And yeah, you can run Potion Barrier on your armor too if you want that as a last resort in case like something's really overwhelming, but With Guarding Strike, you won't really worry about that, but if you want to kill things a bit faster, Gravity is definitely better for that. Another option, like I'd said before, is Refreshment. Every time you get a kill, it reduces your potion cooldown by 3 seconds, which normally potions are 45 seconds, or 27 if you're using, say, Hero's Armor. And Potion Barrier lasts 9 seconds, so you got 36 to 18 seconds of potion cooldown that you have to get through after the Potion Barrier runs out. So that means you only need, what, 6 to 12 kills-ish before you can recharge it with Refreshment, which is really easy to do even while your Potion Barrier is up. And even if it runs out, you don't have that much time before it would recharge again, especially if you have Refreshment, so you could just run an infinite Potion Barrier build and just have a blast, especially with, what's it called? Surprise Gift. Very fun. Or you could even use it on, well, actually it's better with a weapon that can summon bees. I wouldn't really recommend Busy Bee on a weapon. But yeah, Refreshment, also very solid. I wouldn't recommend Weakening on this weapon because that's better for weapons that have more reach to hit as many enemies as you can. And this weapon's super narrow, so it's perfect for Guarding Strike and Gravity, but not for Weakening. Anyway, good support armor for a weapon like this. You would want something that focuses on, say, damage reduction, attack speed, weapon damage. You could also go with lifesteal if you want to, if you don't want to run Leeching, or if you want more healing on top of Leeching. So, say, Renegade armor is really solid, Spider armor, Wither armor, those are the 3 I would definitely recommend. There's also Full Metal armor or Highland armor, which are also really good. They have damage and damage reduction. And even Stalwart armor, that's super tanky. If you run one with cooldown, chilling, deflect, and snowball on top of the potion barrier that's built in, it's really hard to die. But yeah, for the armor enchants that you would want to run along with just any melee build, definitely cooldown, because at a high enough power you can keep your Ironhide Amulet for 50% damage reduction and Deathcap Mushroom for more movement speed and double attack speed. You can keep those active constantly at a high enough power. Something like 200 power, a little higher. So that's definitely a number 1. It reduces your Gong from 20 seconds cooldown to 12.4 seconds, if I remember. So yeah, you definitely want to stick with that. Next, I would definitely recommend Potion Barrier just as a last resort if your setup isn't cutting it for certain bullcrap enemy enchant combos and you're gonna die. Pop a potion, have 90% damage reduction to like just tank through those enemies and destroy them, and then you don't have to worry about it. So those 2 I would definitely look out for first. After that, there's a group of enchantments that I would recommend, either 1 or 2 of, depending on if your armor is gilded or not. You could do another cooldown to reduce your Gong's cooldown to 7.7 seconds, which is very useful. There's also Chilling, which slows enemies down by 60% for a second every 2 seconds, so it's like 30% less movement and attack speed, so it's kind of like 30% damage reduction. There's also Deflect, for ranged enemies if you're stuck in a melee situation and there's enemies in the back that are shooting at you that you can't get to yet, and especially if you have Cowardice and you want full health. Deflect, about half the time you're not going to take damage from those ranged shots, and especially if you're using Full Metal armor or Stalwart armor, which have 30% hit negation, that combines with Deflect to be really tanky against ranged attacks. Then there's Snowball, which every second at max level will stun 1 enemy, and if it perfectly alternates between 2 enemies, it can actually keep them stun locked infinitely, even on Apocalypse plus 25. And still, even if it only targets like 1 enemy at a time, in a group, it can be really helpful for holding off something really dangerous. But you gotta watch out because enemies that can't be stunned are not affected by that at all. And then there's also, like you can see here, Cowardice. If you're at full HP, you get 40% more damage, which, especially with a pickaxe, can be the difference between one-shotting a Wither skeleton that would give you that annoying Wither effect, and not one-shotting them and getting that annoying Wither effect. So yeah, you can run that as well. So to summarize, cooldown, Potion Barrier, then any 2 of cooldown, Chilling, Snowball, Cowardice, and Deflect. You'll be really solid with that setup, and incredibly hard to kill. That's about all that I can think of for pickaxes, and I would say also, I'm going to talk about every weapon separately, but what I said about a pickaxe with crit, committed, gravity, leeching, or crit, committed, guarding strike, leeching, that applies to a bunch of weapons as well. Any spears, any glaives, any whip weapons, anything that's really narrow like that and hits kind of medium speed, kind of slow, definitely you want to stick with that. And in the description below, to make things a little easier, I'm going to again include some enchantment combos that I would run for a pickaxe, just, you know, to see what to look out for. if it's not gilded, again, like I said, stick with at least 1 damage enchant and a healing enchantment. Then you can run either a 2nd damage enchantment or, say, Gravity or Guarding Strike, so like Leeching, Committed, Guarding Strike, Leeching, Committed, Gravity, if it's not gilded. Stuff like that, very solid. Or Committed, Shockwave Swirling with Lifesteal Armor, that could work too. Anyway, until next time, I've been Shin, and I'll see ya.